Sahana Bhunatu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vinishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityormamritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Savitur Varamurupam Jyoti Parasya Dhimahi Yana Satyena Dipayet. Good evening and good morning. So, we come to the 25th chapter in the Life Divine this week, the Knot of Matter. This commenced the third year of the journal Arya, the Philosophic Review. It was released on his birthday in 1916. And as always, we begin with citations from the Veda or the Vedantic tradition. This time, he has added and substituted to these citations. The knot of matter. We've seen how he has described this omnipresent reality, which if we were to give it a name, he would call Satchit Ananda in consonance with the Vedantic tradition. Existence, consciousness, bliss, an unpartite, perfect unity of infinite being, consciousness, and delight. And this throws itself into immaculate and harmonious self-organization through an agency of comprehensive and apprehending awareness that Sri Aurobindo calls the supramental. And as a creative impetus, this supramental reality, which holds within itself this unpart unity, establishes diversity within that oneness, and then allows that diversity to step forward and ever more forward so that it can seek the truth of its own separated formation. And the principle of mind, a kind of diminished awareness extending from the supramental, comes into being and leans fully into this possibility of the diversity, and all these many points of view stand each and say, I am and I can do. And these teeming multiple possibilities, potentialities, dive in a sense into the making further of the cosmos, establishing through the Chit Shakti the power of life, establishing through the principle of sheer existence, sat, the principle of matter. And we see arranged, as we regard upwards, this grand metaphysical reality that begins above and extends below, begins in some nameless, what is it? We can say of it that it is Sat Chit Ananda. We can say that it is existence, but in a sense existence has to stand out from something. We can say that the supramental is the balancing of oneness and manyness. We can see that the mind extends these divergent possibilities of the supramental into extreme. And we can see that life derives itself from this power of consciousness, that matter derives itself from self-existent being. And so, there we have it, the world staircase. Sri Aurobindo will now proceed deeper into exploring what is this mystery of matter and how do we arrive at what seems to be the antithesis of what is spirit. If spirit is all conscious and all aware and undivided being, then how do we arrive at a material existence which is divided to the extreme, in which consciousness has become inconscience? So, we take it up, but first we look at these Vedic citations. These are in fact from the Rig Veda. The first is from the 5th mandala, and it says, I cannot travel to the truth of the luminous Lord by force or by the duality. Who are they that protect the foundation of the falsehood? Anritasya. Who are the guardians of the unreal word? Asato vachasa. So the seer who has composed this poem from the substance of his own inner life sees that he cannot get to that great truth through the sheer exercise of his will. He cannot storm the gates of heaven, nor can he get there through the puzzling out of what is true and what is not true. This is, that is, which thing is true. So by neither of those paths can he arrive at a satisfying solution. And so he asks, who are they protecting this foundation? Who are the guardians of this word which has made unreality, falsehood, come into being? Well, you can't see it from the level of the mind, but it is that same one who governs everything. However astonishing that might be to the mind, this greater reality swallows all these oppositions and discords into itself. So that's the first. The second citation was originally taken from the 19th hymn to Agni and read in English. New conditions are born successively. Covering upon covering awakens to consciousness. In the lap of the mother, the soul sees. Now the mother here is not the Mahashakti of the later Tantric tradition. The mother here is Mother Earth. So you keep peeling back reality after reality, and you awaken to the truth of it, and finally, in harmony with this earth principle, you gain insight into the functioning of the cosmos. Sri Aurobindo decided that was not apt for what he was really trying to say in this chapter. So he substituted most of what we commonly call the creation hymn. It's from the 10th mandala, the 129th hymn, sukta. It's called the Nasadiya sukta. Nasadiya means not the non-existent. And in English, then existence was not, nor non-existence. The mid-world was not, nor the ether, nor what is beyond. What covered all? Where was it? In whose refuge? What was that ocean, dense and deep? Death was not, nor immortality, nor the knowledge of day and night. That one, tad ekam, lived without breath by his self-law. There was nothing else, nor aught beyond it. In the beginning, darkness was hidden by darkness. All this was an ocean of inconscience. When universal being was concealed by fragmentation, then by the greatness of its energy, tapas, that one was born. That moved at first as desire within, kama, which was the primal seed of mind. The seers of truth discovered the building of being in non-being by will in the heart and by the thought. Their ray was extended horizontally. But what was there below? What was there above? There were casters of the seed. There were greatnesses. There was self-law below. There was will above. So you can see this is a cosmological hymn. This is talking about the beginning of things. And what is there before the beginning that you can speak nothing about? You'll remember in the earlier chapters when Sri Aurobindo was describing, is there a non-existence? Is there an existence? When the Upanishads speak of non-existence, they mean that which outstrips even positive being, which is free from its self-formulation as existence. Even Sat is exceeded by the reality of that unknown. You cannot give it a name. It outstrips even this concept of Sat Chit Ananda. So from that, we gather what? Nothing. The gods themselves come into being later than that. The universe comes into being later than that. These are all things born from time, moving in space, whether it's immaterial space or physical. The physical measurement of time, or what seems to be eternal. That thing can be assigned to no reality. No words stick to it. The mind falls back, baffled, trying to attain that, in the words of the Taittiriya Upanishad. So what covered all? Where was it? It had no location. Locations don't exist yet. Was it an ocean? Dense and deep? Death could not exist because life does not exist. It predates that. There is no division between night and day, light and dark. That one, tad ekam, is self-existent and is, in a sense, an expression of what that mystery is. So these themes will continue through these pages, and it'll take us a couple of weeks to get through this chapter. To take the emphasis off of rising and going upwards, removing covering after covering. I think he's substituted this second citation to give us the sense of the downward plunge, the dark mystery. What lies behind the contrarieties of existence? And this hymn of creation, Nasadiya Sukta, probably served better. So, then we go forward now. Again, he revised this chapter when he was redoing the Life Divine. He got started on it in 1939. If then the conclusion at which we have arrived is correct, and there is no other possible on the data upon which we are working, the sharp division which practical experience and long habit of mind have created between spirit and matter has no longer any fundamental reality. The world is a differentiated unity, a manifold oneness, not a constant attempt at compromise between eternal dissonances, not an everlasting struggle between irreconcilable opposites. So this is a restatement already of what his position is. This gulf between spirit and matter is unreal. It does not exist. They are one and the same thing. There is only a world, a universe, which is an expression of this oneness which has become many, a manifold oneness, as he says. So what seems to be this play of opposites is what appears to the mind. It baffles the mind. Our largest spiritual experience sublates these, swallows them up into itself. He continues, an inalienable oneness generating infinite variety is its foundation and beginning. Remember how often in the early chapters he used this term inalienable. That which you can't get rid of. If it's yours, you can't give it away. If somebody wants to take it from you, they can't. It cannot be made alien to your being. An inalienable oneness generating infinite variety is its foundation and beginning. So, the term means that even if the variety is endless, it cannot abrogate that oneness. Oneness is the law of being. Being may become multiple, but it cannot be divided, because that would imply that oneness would separate from itself and oneness would be lost. But that is not the truth. The many always exist within the one. A constant reconciliation behind apparent division and struggle, combining all possible disparates for vast ends in a secret consciousness and will which is ever one and master of all its own complex action, appears to be its real character in the middle. We must assume, therefore, that a fulfillment of the emerging will and consciousness and a triumphant harmony must be its conclusion. So an inalienable oneness is the beginning. It is there behind things as the real character, even in the middle of the play of the cosmos. And there must be a triumphant harmony which the universe concludes with or sustains with, you know. Remember the final chord in a famous song by the Beatles. What is it, Day in the Life? Bong, and it goes on and on and on. If we reach that kind of universal resolution to the challenge of existence, then that harmony plays endlessly. There is no end to it because it exists within the self-existent being which alone exists. Substance is the form of itself on which it works, and of that substance, If matter is one end, spirit is the other. The two are one. Spirit is the soul and reality of that which we sense as matter. Matter is a form and body of that which we realize as spirit. Substance, a word we think we know and understand. It's got a Latin origin, substare, sub meaning under, stare meaning to stand, but it's drawn originally from the Greek term hypostasis, which means exactly the same thing. And those of you who have read Plotinus understand about the hypostases of existence. From the one, we move all the way down a great chain of being until we arrive at matter, which seems to be its opposite. Sri Aurobindo builds upon this Greek understanding, its early philosophy. So, substance to the Greeks would mean an underlying supporting substratum which is below all that changes in phenomena. So there would be something supporting this change, or the change might be apparent but always be within this reality which remains unmoved by the thing which changes standing upon it. Of course, there's a lot that happens in philosophy after the Greeks formulate this idea. We won't necessarily follow all of that out unless it becomes pertinent. So substance is the form of itself. It's the form of consciousness and being. And of that substance, that underlying reality, if matter is one end, spirit's the other, so there's a connection. That means there is no gulf in existence. From the high to the low, there's that one omnipresent reality, reality which is everywhere at once. It doesn't get lost. The two are one. Spirit is the soul and reality of that which we sense. We sense as matter. So it is through the act of sensation that, in a sense, matter is formed. Remember, the extension of conscious being through its awareness into gross forms, because they really, these outer objects, arrive from inner impulsion. They are precipitated into what seems to be physical and extant being from inner realities. Matter is simply the embodiment of spirit. So, he continues, certainly, there is a vast practical difference between spirit and matter. And on that difference, the whole indivisible series and ever-ascending degrees of the world existence are founded. Substance, we have said, is conscious existence, chit shakti, presenting itself to the sense as object, so that, on the basis of whatever sense relation is established, the work of world formation and cosmic progression may proceed. So conscious existence, chit shakti, which is an extension of being, presents itself to the sense. It is only itself that has become that object which the sense can apprehend. So it is both regarding from inside and establishing itself as this, quote, outer form. It must be the regarding awareness for substance to come into formation. And as it comes into formation, then the cosmos can begin to move. If it doesn't do that, there is no cosmos. He continues, but there need not be only one basis, only one fundamental principle of relation immutably created between sense and substance. On the contrary, there is an ascending and developing series. So this seed relationship between subject and object doesn't obtain only on one level. It can obtain on all levels, depending on which of the various strands of becoming being places its emphasis. We'll see. We are aware of another substance in which pure mind works as its natural medium, and which is far subtler, more flexible, more plastic than anything that our physical sense can conceive of as matter. Remember, he's been speaking about matter as the formation of this conscious existence. But mind is a kind of substance as well, as solid in its own sphere as matter is in its. We can speak of a substance of mind because we become aware of a subtler medium in which forms arise and action takes place. We can speak also of a substance of pure dynamic life energy, other than the subtlest forms of material substance and its physically sensible force currents. So too, then, there is a realm of life energy, which is in formation, which is substantial, in which conscious existence gives it right to exist as power. So we have mind as developing awareness, we have life as enveloping power, and we have physicality, matter, which begins as the basis of the cosmos. Spirit itself, he writes, is pure substance of being, presenting itself as an object no longer to physical, vital, or mental sense, but to a light of a pure spiritual perceptive knowledge in which the subject becomes its own object, that is to say, in which the timeless and spaceless is aware of itself in a pure spiritually self-conceptive self-extension as the basis and primal material of all existence. So, matter, life, mind, but spirit can have that same relationship with itself that is possible at all these other stages and levels of manifestation. And there, it is a matter of pure substance of being. No intermediary, but this comprehending and apprehending, this unifying and diversifying principle exist within its pure being. And it conceives and extends from within itself, and you might say it is because it does that at the spiritual level that all other positings of being can occur at mind, life, and physical levels. Again, as above, so below. Because that great being has conceived of itself in this way, that conception can carry itself throughout the cosmos as it arranges itself harmoniously and appropriately at each stage of involution, involving itself into mind, involving itself into life, involving itself into matter, and all of those implied in matter. In matter, all are concealed, all are embedded. So in matter sleeps this reality of life, sleeps this reality of mind, even before the cosmos begins. But what is the secret reality of that inconscient matter before the cosmos begins? It contains within itself spirit. Spirit is there. And it is that pulsation of spirit within it that makes life evolve out, makes mind appear in living forms, and grows ever more on a long march, eonically, back to its spiritual oneness. Sri Aurobindo's vision is wonderful. By the way, if we wanted to give a bit of credit to Western philosophy, we might note here that to René Descartes, the founder of dualism, that devil of philosophy, he did have the insight that substance is that which can exist by itself and in itself. So in a way, that harkens back to this Vedantic truth that Sri Aurobindo has realized here. So forward, onward. Beyond this foundation is the disappearance of all conscious differentiation between subject and object in an absolute identity. And there we can no longer speak of substance. So when, in this spiritual reality, all is drawn back into its absoluteness, then subject and object, even as possibilities, disappear. And so that something could be a substance, that would mean that something is standing upon it for a substance to be there. When everything has become impartible, then there is no positive expression of being in this way. There is no manifestation. And he continues, therefore, it is a purely conceptive, a spiritually, not a mentally conceptive difference, ending in a practical distinction, which creates the series descending from spirit through mind to matter, and ascending again from matter through mind to spirit. But the real oneness is never abrogated, and when we get back to the original and integral view of things, we see that it is never even truly diminished or impaired, not even in the grossest densities of matter. Brahman is not only the cause and supporting power and indwelling principle of the universe, he is also its material and its soul material. It is interesting that this term, Brahman, which is neutral in gender, he calls he, because he wants to ascribe to it personhood, personality. It is not simply a sheer existence, it is an existent. Remember, this entire concept of Satchit Ananda is a rather late development. It's about 1,000 years old, and it comes from Vedantic Bhakti tradition, not from the staunch and stern impersonalism of Shankara's Vedanta. It comes from the Bhakti Vedanta tradition instead. So Brahman is not only the cause and supporting power and indwelling principle of the universe, he is also its material and its soul material. This is akin to Kashmir Shaivism. Again, Sri Aurobindo never had the opportunity that I know of within his life to read about that philosophy. But people later said that there are striking similarities between Sri Aurobindo's vision of this all-encompassing reality and what was stated in that old Trika philosophy, best articulated by Abhinavagupta. Again, about 1,100 years ago or so. To continue, matter also is Brahman, and it is nothing other than or different from Brahman. This is an absolute statement. Sri Aurobindo refuses to admit a gulf or to say for a moment that matter is different from spirit. It is spirit made concrete, made dense. If indeed matter were cut off from spirit, this would not be so. But it is, as we have seen, only a final form and objective aspect of the divine existence, with all of God ever present in it and behind it. Remember, what Sri Aurobindo has called the first half of the life divine, in a prefatory title, is omnipresent reality. There's only one reality, and it is everywhere. Through all the worlds, beyond all the worlds. There can only be that one. There is no other. As this apparently brute and inert matter is everywhere and always instinct with a mighty dynamic force of life, as this dynamic but apparently unconscious life secretes within it an ever-working, unapparent mind of whose secret dealings it is the overt energy, as this ignorant, unillumined, and groping mind in the living body is supported and sovereignly guided by its own real self, the supermind, which is there equally in unmentalized matter, so all matter as well as all life, mind, and supermind are only modes of the Brahman, the eternal, the spirit, Satchit Ananda, who not only dwells in them all, but is all these things, though no one of them is his absolute being. So you see, Satchit Ananda again is a who, not an it in this sentence. Dwells in all of these things, an omnipresent reality. Each is real within it. Each is an aspect, an extension of its being, but none, can we say, is the entirety of Satchidananda, not even supermind, not even its own agency for self-expression, by which it generates the cosmos, envisions truth in action. No, not even that is all-absorbing, so as to say that it is equivalent to Satchitananda. He continues, but still there is this conceptive difference and practical distinction, and in that, even if matter is not really cut off from spirit, yet it seems with such a practical definiteness to be so cut off, it is so different, even so contrary in its law. The material life seems so much to be the negation of all spiritual existence that its rejection might well appear to be the one shortcut out of the difficulty, as undoubtedly it is. But a shortcut or any cut is no solution. You gain an exit, you gain a departure from the riddle of existence, but you don't solve it. This dark contrariety, which has been figured in that Vedic citation that we started with, poses a challenge to those of us who, figuring the spirit in mental and human life, search for an answer. How do we draw concord from these discords? How do we unify these disparate realities? How do we heal the divisions of existence? We're here to do that. But if we say, gee, it's too tough, I'm just going to go to moksha. I'm going to hie my way into nirvana. Then we leave the world unsatisfied and its problems unsolved. We have re-entered sheer spiritual reality and we have abandoned the cosmos. To continue with Sri Aurobindo, still, there in matter undoubtedly lies the crux. that raises the obstacle. For because of matter, life is gross and limited and stricken with death and pain. Because of matter, mind is more than half blind, its wings clipped, its feet tied to a narrow perch, and held back from the vastness and freedom above of which it is conscious. Therefore, the exclusive spiritual seeker is justified from his viewpoint if, disgusted with the mud of matter, revolted by the animal grossness of life, or impatient of the self-imprisoned narrowness and downward vision of mind, he determines to break from it all and return by inaction and silence to the spirit's immobile liberty. But that is not the sole viewpoint, nor, because it has been sublimely held or glorified by shining and golden examples, need we consider it the integral and ultimate wisdom, regardless of the great heroes of Jainism, the shining exemplars of Buddhism, the staunch silence of the Advaitins. There is a greater wisdom. There is a more embracing vision possible. So he says, rather, liberating ourselves from all passion and revolt, let us see what this divine order of the universe means. And as for this great knot and tangle of matter denying the spirit, let us seek to find out and separate its strands so as to loosen it by a solution and not cut through it by a violence. We must state the difficulty, the opposition first, entirely, trenchantly, with exaggeration if need be, rather than with diminution, and then look for the issue. So here we go. This is the knot of matter that he's talking about. This great tangle, which the spiritual would say, cut it like the Gordian knot, slice it in half and be gone. No, let us unravel it a little at a time. But let's state clearly what we're looking at here. And then he says, and then look for the issue. Issue here, he's not saying let's look for the topic, which is the often an American connotation of the term issue, but this is going back to the real meaning in British and originally in French as well, which means a going or a flowing out. In other words, let's look for a way out of this impasse. So, he's going to analyze this into a number of perplexities which we meet when we deal with matter. And he says, first then, the fundamental opposition matter presents to spirit is this, that it is the culmination of the principle of ignorance. And what is ignorance again? It is the act of the spirit ignoring itself, willingly forgetting who it is, so as to encase itself in what seems to be other, to project itself as object, which is really supported by subject, but in the justification of that object, to so conceal its spiritual substance that it seems to lapse into it, to lose all awareness. If it were aware from the beginning of its reality, it would know that it is omnipresent, that it is one with everything, but instead it loses itself into the objectification, into the substantiation, and there sits. So it is the nadir of the movement of ignorance, which matter seems to say, I am, back to spirit. Here, consciousness has lost and forgotten itself in a form of its works. As a man might forget in extreme absorption not only who he is, but that he is at all, and become momentarily only the work that is being done and the force that is doing it. You're well aware of this in your own activities. Sometimes you can get so engrossed in what you're doing, you don't even know you're there. Only the work exists. In a way, it's a beautiful movement. Without the activity of the mind standing in the way, things get done smoothly. But what if you could have that same spontaneity and be fully conscious too? Be felicitously conscious. Wouldn't that be even more wonderful? We'll grow to that. The spirit, self-luminous, infinitely aware of itself behind all workings of force and their master, seems here to have disappeared and not to be at all. Somewhere he is, perhaps, but here he seems to have left only a brute and inconscient material force which creates and destroys eternally without knowing itself, or what it creates, or why it creates at all, or why it destroys what once it has created. It does not know, for it has no mind. It does not care, for it has no heart. And if that is not the real truth, even of the material universe, if behind all this false phenomenon there is a mind, a will, and something greater than mind or mental will, yet it is this dark semblance that the material universe itself presents as a truth to the consciousness which emerges in it out of its night. And if it be no truth but a lie, yet is it a most effective lie, for it determines the conditions of our phenomenal existence and besieges all our aspiration and effort. So this original ignorance, this stationing in this culmination, gives us the sense of the background for that Vedic citation from the 10th mandala, that figure of darkness. The Rishi, growing out of that field of darkness, can't tell, is this real, is that real? What is there finally in the world that I can rely upon? All seems a quiz, all seems a riddle. 4. This is the monstrous thing, the terrible and pitiless miracle of the material universe, that out of this no mind, a mind, or at least minds emerge and find themselves struggling feebly for life, helpless individually, only less helpless when in self-defense they associate their individual feeblenesses in the midst of the giant ignorance which is the law of the universe. Hint, hint. It is through association and mutuality building back towards unity that we find some justice, protection, and eventual satisfaction in the world. We have to work together. Out of this heartless inconscience, and within its rigorous jurisdiction, hearts have been born and aspire and are tortured and bleed under the weight of the blind and insentient cruelty of this iron existence, a cruelty which lays its law upon them and becomes sentient in their sentience, brutal, ferocious, horrible. But what, after all, behind appearances, is this seeming mystery? We can see that it is the consciousness which had lost itself, returning again to itself, emerging out of its giant self-forgetfulness, slowly, painfully, as a life that is would-be sentient, half-sentient, dimly sentient, wholly sentient, and finally struggles to be more than sentient, to be again divinely self-conscious, free, infinite, immortal. Well, we've seen a lot of the word sentient recently. It simply means capable of sensation. So you see this progression. A life that would be sentient becomes half sentient, then dimly sentient, wholly sentient. We're just becoming aware of the world. Our senses are becoming active. But finally struggles to be more than that, to become divinely self-conscious. Awareness is different from sentience. Sentience, again, is an extension of awareness. Mind extends the senses. Mind may be, actually, the king of the senses, is a kind of sense itself. But it is an organ of a larger consciousness. And senses do service to that mind. And that mind gathers and tries to know and understand as a growing consciousness, moving towards that divinity, that immortality. It always seeks it, is never satisfied until it gets it. So human existence will always puzzle and leave you feeling, until you get back to that. But he concludes by saying, but it works towards this under a law that is the opposite of all these things, under the conditions of matter, that is to say, against the grasp of the ignorance. The movements it has to follow, the instruments it has to use, are set and made for it by this brute and divided matter, and impose on it at every step ignorance and limitation. So this is the game. We have accepted to play this. We are limited, we are divided, and we have to move towards full control, utter empowerment, and reunification of our being by actually defeating all these things which persist within the original formulation of matter. Note how Sri Aurobindo has analyzed matter. He hasn't given it a chemical analysis. He's not trying to see what it's composed of in terms of its particles and particulars. What he's looking at is how it moves from the great strands of being. How do we arrive at it from metaphysics to physics? From above to the below. And there's this chain of ratiocination based upon a deep spiritual vision thrown into philosophic order that forms his argument. And now he continues. Yes, we're going to do another paragraph. For the second fundamental opposition that matter offers to spirit is this, that it is the culmination of bondage to mechanic law and opposes to all that seeks to liberate itself a colossal inertia. Not that matter itself is inert, it is rather an infinite motion, an inconceivable force, a limitless action, whose grandiose movements are a subject for our constant admiration. But while spirit is free, master of itself and its works, not bound by them, creator of law and not its subject, this giant matter is rigidly chained by a fixed and mechanical law which is imposed on it, which it does not understand nor has ever conceived, but works out inconsciently as a machine works and knows not who created it, by what process or to what end. So matter itself is unaware of its origins, doesn't know why it does what it does, doesn't know what its maker intended it to do, why it intended it to do it, doesn't even know if it has a maker, but simply rolls it out. Spirit is master of itself. All that it projects is from its self-aware being. But matter does not know that. It is acting out a law that has been imposed upon it. Now we saw long back that it's Satchit Ananda articulates itself as the supramental consciousness, that it brings into existence a functioning of its own awareness, which constellates real ideas. And those ideas are built in an automatic harmony. And so there is a kind of law of the divine, but it is self-imposed. It is aware of it. It does it because it's delighted to do it. But matter, trying to wake up at the base of the cosmos, does not know this, is impelled by a force which it does not understand. It is, of course, that secret omnipresent reality which really stimulates its movement forward, but it doesn't know that. And then there are the other grades of existence to consider. For instance, the next sentence. And when life awakes and seeks to impose itself on physical form and material force, and to use all things at its own will and for its own need, when mind awakes and seeks to know the who, the why, the how of itself and all things, and above all to use its knowledge for the imposition of its own freer law in self-guiding action upon things, material nature seems to yield, even to approve and aid, though after a struggle, reluctantly, and only up to a certain point. But beyond that point, it presents an obstinate inertia, obstruction, negation, and even persuades life and mind that they cannot go farther, cannot pursue to the end their partial victory. Life strives to enlarge and prolong itself and succeeds. But when it seeks utter wideness and immortality, it meets the iron obstruction of matter and finds itself bound to narrowness and death. Mind seeks to aid life and to fulfill its own impulse to embrace all knowledge, to become all light, to possess truth and be truth, to enforce love and joy and be love and joy. But always there is the deviation and error and grossness of the material life instincts, and the denial and obstruction of the material sense and the physical instruments. Error ever pursues its knowledge. Darkness is inseparably the companion and background of its light. Truth is successfully sought, and yet, when grasped, it ceases to be truth, and the quest has to continue. Love is there, but it cannot satisfy itself. Joy is there, but it cannot justify itself. And each of them drags as if its chain, or casts as if its shadow, its own opposites. Anger and hatred and indifference, satiety and grief and pain. The inertia with which matter responds to the demands of the mind and life prevents the conquest of the ignorance and of the brute force that is the power of the ignorance. So far then, we've seen that matter first culminates in ignorance. That is the basis of our difficulty. And then culminates in bondage to a mechanic law. Life emerging, trying to gain control of this material, is defeated, enlarges itself, but must always die. Mind, seeking to know, searches out truth, discovers something, then finds out the opposite is also true, is frustrated, deviates, and gives up its pursuit in frustration. So, inertia is the consequence of this mechanic law, which itself is tied to or thrown out by this principle of ignorance, which lies at the base of material existence. So I think we'll pause there. We've gone far enough tonight. And we have roughly half the chapter remaining for us, and we'll take it up next week. I think we will still be in the month of August. It will be the 30th of August when we look at this next. I think I found a passage which suits the material we've been looking at tonight in Sri Aurobindo's epic poem Savitri. A consciousness that knows not its own truth, a vagrant hunter of misleading dawns, between the being's dark and luminous ends, moves here in a half-light that seems the whole, an interregnum in reality, cuts off the integral thought, the total power. It circles or stands in a vague interspace, doubtful of its beginning and its close, or runs upon a road that has no end. Far from the original dusk, the final flame in some huge void in conscience, it lives, like a thought persisting in a wide emptiness. As if an unintelligible phrase suggested a million renderings to the mind, it lends a purport to a random world, a conjecture leaning upon doubtful proofs, a message misunderstood, a thought confused, missing its aim, is all that it can speak, or a fragment of the universal word. It leaves two giant letters void of sense, while without sanction turns the middle sign, carrying an enigmatic universe, as if a present without future or past, repeating the same revolution's whirl, turned on its axis in its own inane. Thus is the meaning of creation veiled, for without context reads the cosmic page. Its signs stare at us like an unknown script, as if appeared screened by a foreign tongue, or code of splendor, signs without a key, a portion of a parable sublime. It wears to the perishable creature's eyes the grandeur of a useless miracle, wasting itself that it may last a while, a river that can never find its sea. It runs through life and death on an edge of time. A fire in the night is its mighty action's blaze. This is our deepest need, to join once more what now is parted, opposite and twain, remote in sovereign spheres that never meet, or fronting like far poles of night and day. We must fill the immense lacuna we have made, re-wed the closed finite's lonely consonant with the open vowels of infinity. A hyphen must connect matter and mind, the narrow isthmus of the ascending soul. We must renew the secret bond in things. Our hearts recall the lost divine idea. Reconstitute the perfect word. Unite the Alpha and the Omega in one sound. Then shall the spirit and nature be at one. That's from the Book of Beginnings, Canto 4, The Secret Knowledge. You should be able to find it, let us say, around page 57. As always, a pleasure to have you with us. Namaste, Jai Ma.
Namaste.
And to all our friends on Zoom, a good evening or a good morning to you, wherever you are.